Yeah, I listened to the first one that you did where you were talking.
And we both had no idea what we were doing, so that's not even really a good example
Yeah.
of
Well,
the
I
rapport
enjoyed it
that we
though.
have
It was
each.
nice to kind of get a picture of
Well, yeah,
who you
that's
guys
that's
are.
one of the mysterious things with our generation is like marriage is such a weird thing now.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, if you want to throw the headphones on and double check your levels, make sure this thing isn't touching this thing. Yeah,
This is all new to me.
yeah. Nah, you should be good.
All right.
I'll sit in the chair that leaves white hair everywhere.
Strange.
So
Okay.
yeah, you all good?
So this is kind of so I know how loud I am and.
Yeah. So yeah, I was gonna say if you want to pull that a little closer to you, it's a super directional mic, so just
gosh.
basically yell at it. You can adjust
do
however you
this.
need. Yeah.
I'm in
Yeah.
the wrong spot here. All right, how's that?
That's good.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Awesome.
So I was gonna say it's already recording, so we may as well
Oh.
get into it. So
Okay. Cool.
uh
I didn't have time to get nervous.
no, yeah, that's the easiest. I said that to Jim is like, yeah, people just turn on if you hold up your phone towards them or turn on a recording device, like people clam up. It's
Yeah,
super weird.
Yeah, I told Brian that before I left. Well, like I was saying to you earlier, all day today I've been very aware of how I sound. So I've been clearing my throat and like.
Yeah, making sure that nothing's gonna be like I get anxious during every episode, so it's just
Yeah.
it's kind of how it is, and I always worry that like I have upper respiratory issues that
Oh, really?
sometimes block me up, and it's like, no, that's not gonna be
Yeah.
good if that happens.
No, I just have talking issues.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say between you and your husband, who will be on eventually, you guys seem like very eclectic folk.
You know, it's funny. We were talking to each other after you approached me, and I said, Brian, I don't think we're that interesting.
Well, that's the big like. I have a friend of mine that I went on just because I've known her most of my life. She's a wonderful human being, and like to get people to believe that they are more interesting, like to get people to willingly accept that they're interesting from an outsider's perspective is really hard.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
that's the hardest thing with this is just getting people to say, "Oh, this is my like." Not people that herald their things as like the only thing that they're doing. It's like, no, you're a regular human being, but I know there are thoughts going on that are definitely worth talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, too, you normalize yourself.
Oh,
'Cause,
absolutely.
I mean, I live with myself every day, so
Yeah.
I'm not very interesting to me, but
Yeah, and I was going to say, on a daily basis, I wonder whether or not I'm like actually living life in any reasonable sense. It's just like,
yeah.
I go to work and I'm at work for 14 hours and then my shift's over and then I come home and it's just, I don't know what I'm doing with myself.
Yeah. I think if you look at it that way, everybody's interesting. We just don't all
Yeah.
realize it. You know?
Yeah, and it's hard.
Different.
It's hard to get people to open up about anything nowadays because we don't have any connectivity.
Yeah.
You know, we met online. I know that we had to have met in person at least once.
Probably, and didn't know it.
Yeah, just through the vast circle of friends that are it just.
We spent a lot of time at the depot and a lot of local things like that. So I'm sure we've crossed paths. More than we know.
Well, I was gonna say that was the reason I was so interested in you. You did Wrath of Typhon's cover art for Kingdom of Fear.
Yes.
Did you do their first one too?
I did. It's the same monster.
Yeah, it's
just
still
reimagined.
still the god Typhon.
Yeah, yeah.
Jay went on like a 40-minute conversation with me about who Typhon was and the whole folklore behind it, and I was like,
Yeah,
dude, I don't even
it
know
really
what you're
came
doing.
from them. I mean, they told me their story
Mm-hmm.
when they did the album. They gave me their story, and then I just interpreted that visually.
Well,
So-
I love it because this one. So the first album cover that I'm thinking of was Typhon, and he was just rising out of the ground. He was huge and he was monstrous. And then this one puts it more into perspective because he's standing between two mountains. There's villagers running, and for some reason, there's a girl at a stake.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what caught me. Was like, oh, you're in the middle of a witch burning, and it's like, oh, okay, there's other shit to deal with right this very second.
Yeah, there's a lot of hidden symbolisms in there. If you look through their lyrics, and I don't know if they printed their lyrics on the album or not, but if you look through the song titles and the lyrics, it kind of makes sense. There's a dog in there too. If you look, he might be hidden behind the logo. Actually,
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
In the original art, there is a dog, but
I gotcha.
yeah. So that they had a lot of things that they asked to kind of put in there, and they're in there, but they're not real. They don't explain themselves unless you listen to the album.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's like the piece that Paul did for me up above the door. Is
Yes.
like he, at first glance, I looked at it and I was like, I don't even know what's going on. And then he explained it to me, and I was like, oh, okay, no, that makes perfect sense.
It's funny how the story gives something so much more meaning.
Yeah.
But then there are times where you don't really want to know the story.
Well,
you know,
my very favorite piece from Peter Max, which I'm totally a sellout. I love commercial art. It's my favorite thing in the whole world. And Peter Max did a piece. I forget what it's even called, but there's a woman diving in the desert, and she's mid dive, and it's just really plain, because he's not really into adding depth through shading and all that stuff. Like he's very, right in your face with all the bright colors and all that. And that piece just, there's not really anything to it. There's just a woman diving in the desert. And if I knew the story behind it, I really wouldn't want to know it.
Yeah, it might ruin it, right?
Yeah. And somebody nearly ruined Peter Max for me. My wife's uncle lives in Manhattan. He's grew up in Brooklyn and all that. And he knew Peter Max personally, bought that original painting, which we went and visited him. I had no idea that he had that piece. And I went down into his downstairs and I about collapsed. And so I was standing there with it, and he told me all about Peter Max. Turns out he was a real asshole in person, and I was like, after all the Sprite commercials and the Yellow Submarine and all that stuff, like, I could see him just being somebody who's really money hungry and really after that versus having like that whole artistic life.
That's always disappointing. I kind of had the same. It's funny, going back in time, like I had no real frame of reference for art because I was homeschooled, and it was for religious reasons, so I wasn't really introduced to artists or art. I just liked certain things, and that's what I like to spend my time doing. So I've always had this affinity for fantasy themes. So as I got older, people always compared things that I do to Frazetta, because that's automatically who you think of when you think of fantasy art. So the first time I heard the name Frazetta, I was really excited, which was actually only a few years ago. It's embarrassing to admit.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll come around with that, but I was going to say that's quite surprising.
It's embarrassing to admit, yeah. So I learned of Frazetta because I started sharing my art publicly, which I've always had a really hard time doing. And I just started doing that over the course of the last maybe 6 years or so. And when I learned it, of course, I was really excited then. And, I'm just Frazetta, everything, is just sopping up everything I could find that had anything to do with Frazetta. And then from there, it ballooned into other artists in the same genre. And I was really disappointed to find an article about his response to somebody who mimicked his artwork for an album cover. And I couldn't tell you the album cover, but it was for Danzig.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the guy who did the artwork, he was reading something that Frazetta had written in his book, and Frazetta actually referenced his artwork. And which immediately would be kind of exciting, right? Like Frazetta's talking about the art that he did, which is great, but it turned out to be very negative. Sort of. That
is such a weird thing. It's like you want, like when I finished my first book, I was talking to some local authors because we have the biggest author around here, personally, in my opinion, is Brian Keene. He does amazing horror and all that stuff.
Okay.
And I've known him through the years through the comic store because he's a customer there. I was a mall rat. It happens. And so I met him a bunch of times, and I've never heard whether or not he picked my books up or not, but everyone else in the writing community thinks I'm a little bit of a lunatic because I love L. Ron Hubbard, and I love pulp trash. I love stuff that's going to end up thrown out. That's just kind of the way it is with me. And when I heard that the first time, I was super bothered by it. And then after a while, I was like, well, yeah, but what's it really matter?
Yeah. I mean, the Frazetta is who Frazetta is, and he's well known for a reason. So I guess, where do you draw the line between appreciating him and appreciating his work?
Yeah, the same thing with H.R. Geiger, because you take Alien and everything that Ridley Scott's done. It's all pretty much a feature for H.R. Geiger, and it's like, well, yeah, other people do that kind of style, and it's great too. But is the value of anything, does it come from who it's coming from?
Yeah.
It's like with the pieces on the wall. Like my wife, Paul Folk, one of my favorite locals is Matt Deterior, and he's just
he's
I love
actually
him
on
as
my Facebook, but I've never met him. I don't think anyway.
You should, because he's a fantastic human being to spend time with. Like he's just he's a goofy guy with kids who loves to paint. He loves, if he's thinking about doing something, he's going to attack it as hard as he can, and if it goes somewhere, it goes somewhere. And most other people would look at his work and say, I would never pay $1,200 for that piece, and I would, because I know who it's coming from, and I know the piece that I'm speaking on was like 3 years ago. Was hanging at Susan's gallery down on King. I can't remember the name of that right now.
Is it the Hive?
Yeah, it was hanging in the stairwell at the Hive, and it reminded me so much of a Peter Max piece that I really fell in love with it. So
yeah.
Well,
I guess that's art. Art is really subjective in that way. I mean, what one person looks at, they may not have a reaction to, but somebody else does.
And that's an odd thing, because did you ever watch Exit Through the Gift Shop?
I have not. No.
Well, so Banksy's the Banksy's the king of street art currently, which I mean, I agree with. Most of the installations he does are just phenomenal, and his styling is great. And then in that documentary, the guy who was making the documentary became I don't even know if you'd want to say artist. He became kind of in that Andy Warhol vein of like, let's Photoshop this and then make screen prints of it and then spray paint it and do all kinds of weird stuff with it. And the methodology that he was using, for anybody who's a fan of what was his name, Mr. Big Shot or some, I forget the guy that made the documentary. He was a really weird French guy, and but he ended up doing an opening of his own. He made a couple $1,000,000 off this opening. He developed his own community while he was doing this documentary, and it was like, if you looked at it, you're like, is this art valuable because it's him, or is it because of the art itself? And the art itself was just kind of cheesy and pretty simplistic. When when you take that versus somebody that's doing silver nitrate negative exposures through a wide lens camera in their house with low light, and they're going through, when they're focusing on the process of the art, are you paying for the process of the art, or are you paying for the art?
Yeah. Well, and that's always been the question in my mind too, is where do you, art really comes from a personal place, and that's how art is kind of different from design, is that it's something that's an extension of who you are, and that's where the value of the art comes from, and your technical ability to execute that is kind of a separate thing from what you're creating. So the way that you create it isn't necessarily maybe as important as what you created, and that's how I've always kind of viewed anything artistic, is that everybody has their own methods, and there isn't really a right or wrong way to create something. When somebody creates something, it's an extension of them, and they're going to do it the way they want to do it, and that's really where the value in art is.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. It's like, sometimes I don't want to have to pay an exorbitant amount of money because you flew into Thailand and picked up a very specific plant and brought it back and stenciled it. And like, I agree that the excess is sometimes maybe a statement in itself. Like, just to tie music into this, Dillinger Escape Plan did a 7-inch, I think it was Jim Fear, and then there were 2 songs on the B side. And it was only a 7-inch record, and the A side played from the inside out, which was, so instead of putting it on the outer edge of the record, you put it in the center at the label, and it played outward. And then on the back, the grooves were of course, my technical knowledge is ridiculous. So the grooves were so close together that when you put the needle on the outside to catch the groove, it would actually randomize what song would play, because they were. So instead of having the song, one song here and then one song here, nobody can see this because I'm doing it with my hands. So, one playing into the other, they were just mixed like this, and the needle would just go wherever it wanted. And does that make that worthwhile music? This was Dillinger Escape Plan before that one album that hit really big with the WWE. Either way, they were noise. They were just they were absolutely noise, and it was like, does the curiosity of a record that's playing what feels like completely incorrectly validate the music, or is the music really good? Because it's Mike Patton, who has a vocal range that's like 7 or 8 octaves. It's crazy. He's in the Guinness record for it. He's an amazing musician. At the same time, Dillinger Escape Plan was kind of weird.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
maybe not for everybody, but
yeah.
I mean, what is?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I always picked up on grind music and noise bands because like Pig Destroyer did a show in Philly, and they screen printed the flyer. They screen printed 50 flyers on stolen street signs in pig's blood, and it's like, that's pretty rad. But if you go see Pig Destroyer in live, it's not really anything all that exciting. Yeah, it's kind of like, what am I doing here most of the time?
Well, I haven't had the pleasure of seeing them, but I'm on board with that. I mean, everything. There's something for everybody when it comes to art and creations, and we're all different. And
definitely.
I don't like to ever devalue what someone created because.
Yeah, I was gonna say there is no real reason for critics to exist.
Yeah,
but at the same time that I watched a video a long time ago about that just completely devalued the art market because it was like, you know, this is all just nonsense, and 5 people are telling you that it's great because it's great, and you're believing that it's great, and you know, all that stuff, and it's like, critics shouldn't exist, but at the same time, should there be? You should garner your own filtration system and stick with that, because if you're picking up art magazines and you're expecting them to give you an opinion on art, that's not quite the way to go, you know.
And I think it's tough to balance that, you know, as an artist myself, you know, you're always questioning what you're doing and whether it, you know, I kind of feel like I fit into this place. Well, I don't fit into a place that I feel comfortable with all of the time. And there's always this mentality, well, you have to be a fantasy artist, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And it's in your own head, really. But it also kind of comes from other people, in that they look at what you're doing and they make a judgment about it. And everybody's a critic. So some people make good judgments, some make bad ones. And it's really easy to internalize that when it's something you created.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's necessarily right. But on the other hand, without somebody to criticize what you created, it kind of has no power. So, I mean, people have to make judgments about what you show them, and some are going to be good and some are going to be bad. And, you know, without that, you know, it has no value. So you really need people to look at it and have some kind of reaction to it, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah. And well, I was going to say, that's a fine edge to walk.
Yeah.
One of my uncles, he was an amazing painter, and believe it or not, because he did remember there was a Frazetta that was a Viking, and there were like he was holding ropes, and there were dogs or something like that, or wolves, and there was a woman next to him. It was one of his like biggest pieces. My uncle, when he was young, we're talking late 60s, early 70s, when Heavy Metal magazine was doing all that. He did a huge painting of it, and his talent was boundless. And he had painted something on the back of a denim vest, because that was the thing to do then.
Yeah.
And there was a guy who was a denim painter at the fairgrounds, and the guy at the fairgrounds said something, and from, you know, an outsider's perspective, it was just like a totally moot point, and it was just unnecessary. But my uncle internalized that so much that he stopped painting entirely.
Yeah, and I can relate to. I've done that myself. I've gone for years without making anything.
Really?
Yeah, and I think it's different with art. You know, I work as a designer by day and a web developer, and I can take criticism all day long when it comes to design. But design's very utilitarian. art is kind of an extension of yourself. So it's hard not to personalize things and to still continue on and see the value in what you're doing. And, everybody has negative and positive feedback when they create something, and you have to kind of accept that and, either learn from it where you can, or, not personalize it or internalize it.
I think that may, like, painting the Mona Lisa, if somebody was like, man, that's terrible, it'd be just as hard to get over hearing that as it would be to have painted the Mona Lisa, because
you can be the most talented person on the planet, and I think you still are affected. I mean, you can't not be affected by negative feedback, know. A few glasses of wine helps, maybe, but it's always going to be there, and you have to be realistic about what is negative feedback because the person doesn't understand or appreciate what you're doing, and what is maybe something that you can take from and learn from to improve what you're doing. And you have to be realistic about it, but it's not easy to be.
I was gonna say that I saw a bunch of people this week are doing that thing on Facebook where you can anonymously criticize your friends, and that seems really dickish.
Yeah, that sounds like a Facebook thing now. Like, I view social media. It's funny. I talk about this all the time with my husband. We go out for our nightly walks. We're trying to trim the fat a little. Mm-hmm. So we go out every night and we walk and we just talk. And we talk a lot about how social media has kind of created this forum of negativity lately. And I don't think it used to be that way like it is now. I don't know if it's because of the political landscape or
I'm not honestly sure, but I do agree with you that that's gotten, like, from the age of MySpace was a friend of mine was trying out for So You Want whatever that Stanley Be a Superhero TV show was.
Okay.
And they did a write-up for him in the newspaper and all that stuff, and he was on MySpace, and somebody recognized him out in real life from MySpace. And I was like, that's the one fun like, they were super fun and happy about it. It was some girls. She was cute. He was cute. Whatever, it worked out. That's how life just works. But yeah, back then it was just about, like, MySpace was all about, you could search people in your area and you could go do stuff with people in your area. You could make new friends. You could do all that stuff. And now,
Well, it's funny. I wouldn't have met my husband if it weren't for MySpace, actually.
Really? I was wondering that, actually.
Well, it's in a roundabout way because I had one childhood friend, and I met her because we were both homeschooled. And we met they had a YMCA homeschool skating thing that they did in Shrewsbury. So we met there, and she later got married, and she had this husband, and he was a big metalhead. And he didn't have a lot of friends or anything nearby, so she took it upon herself to go on MySpace and to hunt for metalheads in the area that maybe could relate to him and be friends with him. So she found Brian, and we just happened to run into each other while we were at her house. But it's funny. It was a couple of years before we actually started dating.
Right.
We both had other people at the time who were very odd partners. I won't take it any further than that, but it worked out.
Yeah. So. Well, I was going to say, now, I grew up in a Southern Baptist household, and we had homeschooled kids in our church. We had, they had their own school in the basement or whatever that I went to for, I think, a year.
Oh, really?
And it was odd because it was like it was set up as classrooms, but it was all individual work. And it's like, okay, well, the problem with me is if you give me individual work, even from my kindergarten, from kindergarten up, if you give me something to do, I'm gonna go do it, and I'll just be done with it. And that was the problem with that was I was advancing too fast.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, all right, you're going back to public school. But then when I went back to public school, I failed miserably for years because I can't be in a structured environment. So how did homeschooling affect you as, like, in your learning? Did you have a regularized schedule, or?
We did not.
Yeah.
And Personally, I mean, it worked for, I'll say this. I have a lot of brothers and sisters. I have a brother and I have two sisters. So there were four of us growing up, but we were raised on a farm kind of out in Seven Valleys. So we were kind of, there wasn't like a lot nearby to do. There wasn't a lot of activities. We didn't spend time around a lot of people. And most of the people that we did spend time around were in the church. So I was a little different in that I didn't make any friends in the church.
Yeah.
So I was always kind of that angry, rebellious teenager where I was like, I questioned everything. I still do. And with the homeschooling, I felt very disconnected from the world and I felt lonely a lot. But on the other hand, I spent a lot of time making art, which is kind of what brought me to where I am today. So it's all relative, but my personal experience with homeschooling was not a great one, and maybe it just wasn't for me.
Well, yeah, it seems like for the people that it works out for the most, it seems like it's made, it's made for them.
Yeah.
And most people some people are just very hard to work with when you're trying to teach them something. And it's like, especially with me, like I can boil everything down to a base concept, and once I have the base concept, I couldn't give a shit about the details.
Yeah.
Like, look, once I figured out how to cook eggs, I figured out how to cook everything else. It just kind of came, and that's my learning process, and that's why my GPA and my college GPA were terrible. It was because they left me on my own to do all that stuff, and it's like, it's easier to program me like a computer and just set me to it. Just give me a list. I'm better that way.
Yeah, I think everyone's different. I don't want to devalue homeschooling because I mean there are definitely situations where I think kids do much better with it than they do in public schools. And
well, yeah, and the swing now seems to be charter schooling, and it feels like charter schooling is just kind of different homeschooling.
Yeah.
Where it's still a communal environment and there is a classroom, whether it be in real life or online, but at the same time it kind of seems like it's up to you. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do with the one kid that's, he has 165 IQ, he's doing long division at 5 years old, and by the time he hits 10, 12 years old, he's going to be so far advanced. What are you going to do with that kid? It's like...
Yeah, I think that's the downside maybe to the public schooling system is that it's hard to really take somebody's strengths and encourage them. And that is possible with homeschooling, but there's also a downside to that in that when you get out of school, you have to go out in the public. You have to be able to work with other people. And
socialization isn't
yeah,
focused
the
on?
socialization was definitely an issue for us. I mean, there are ways to homeschool that isn't an issue, if there's more of a community kind of thing happening. But for us, that wasn't the case. So I definitely struggled jumping from a homeschool environment and then going into college and trying to, I was terrified.
Yeah, well,
I'm shy.
Where did you go to college?
I actually just went. It was Bradley Academy at the time. I guess it changed to AI schools, and I did I did a 2-year there. And it's funny, I don't actually. I don't do what I was taught to do. So I was taught basic graphic design. I got bored with that really quickly after I got out of college. So I self-taught web development.
Oh.
I always have to have a challenge. So that's what I did. And that's mostly what I do now is web development.
So I was going to say, I have a vague understanding. I went to school for computer sciences and I use my phone to Facebook and that's about it. And I lost interest very quickly. Yeah. And but what does a web developer do? Because I know I've heard the term before, and I can't quite figure out whether that's is that long-term programming or is it base programming or is it overall site design, that kind of stuff, or is it just an umbrella?
It depends. The lines are a little blurred, I think, between a web designer, a web developer, and a programmer. As a web designer, you may not touch code at all. A web developer is going to be coding, but it may be more of what we would call front-end code. So I do HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery, which are all more of the visual parts. But if you have, say, a database that collects information, like if somebody submits a form or things that actually have to store information, certain kinds of functions, then that goes more into the programming end of things. So I'm not really a programmer. The coding that I do is all front end code.
Oh, okay.
But I do code a lot.
Yeah.
So it's just a different, programming is more abstract and it's more mathematical. If I wanted to learn it, I might be able to, but I'm not a mathematically minded person, so I'm afraid of it. But with the front end code, it's more, you have an immediate sort of visual result to what you build. So you write the code, it's this weird language, but it has a visual, it creates what you're seeing visually, basically.
Right. So I was going to say, I did when I was in school, HTML was a class on its own. So
Okay.
I do remember HTML from 17 years ago. No,
It's changed a lot.
Yeah, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like all the stuff that I've learned is completely moot because of sites like what's the one website? The place where you can use Squarespace, because like Squarespace is drag and drop. I remember having to go like dig into finding programs to make sure that tables are going to line up and all this like craziness. And it seems like mobile developing is more of a focus now, because most people, what reason do you have, unless it's your job, what reason do you have to own a desktop?
Yeah.
That's
That's how coding has changed a lot since mobile devices came out. Now we build what's called a responsive site, so that no matter what size you scale the site to, it automatically changes layout, and that's really a coding thing. But you could take your browser just on your desktop computer and squish it down, and you'll see the site move and the objects change position, the size of things will change, and that's all done so that it can compensate for any device that might come out or currently be out. So it'll work on a computer, it'll work on an iPad, it'll work on a phone. So most sites now are responsive, and that's really changed. That's the thing with coding, is it changes so fast.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I've told Brian before, my husband, I'm like, eventually I'm going to get tired of relearning things.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be, I'm probably going to have to get a job at Rutgers or something when I can't do it forever, because it's exhausting.
It has to be, because then you're trying to, so not only do you independently contract, or are you through somebody?
It's funny. I'm in a weird situation. So I do work from home, and I have since 2007. I've worked from home. So I run a web hosting business where I have it's about 60 clients who host websites with me, and then on the side, that's kind of a side thing. And then I also do freelance work.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually have worked for a company in Lancaster now since 2010, and I'm technically part-time with them. Oh. So I'm supposed to be part-time. I actually work 40 hours normally with them. So I usually put in between a 40 and 60-hour week with all of those jobs.
That seems like quite a juggle, but does the ability to work from home make it that much better?
I've heard mixed reviews from people. I like working from home, but I'm incredibly self-motivated. I don't need anyone to ever remind me to do something. I'm very good at just shutting my brain down and having no distractions. I can go into this space where I don't hear anything going on around me. And Brian will walk down the stairs. He works from home too. And he'll come down the stairs. He'll be like, "What are we having for dinner?" And I'm like, I don't hear you. 'Cause I can just do that. But some people can't. So working from home is a problem when there's so many distractions there.
Yeah.
The cat wants your attention, or the house is dirty, you can go clean it, or
I was gonna say, I couldn't deal with that with my dogs, because both of my dogs are very they're not willing to go do their own thing.
Yeah. So I to each his own, but I love it. But that's how I am. Like I get a job and I am so obsessed with just getting it done and doing it that I can shut everything else out and focus on the work and get it done. So it's great for me. And I'm not the most social person. So I don't need to be around coworkers. some people say, "Oh, don't you get lonely?" And no.
Yeah, no.
I don't.
Somebody asked me that about my job because I could go for probably 2.5 years without walking into my dispatch office to talk to my boss, and
and you don't miss it, right?
They're like, that doesn't bother you? No, I just go do my thing, and I go spin the cogs, and then I'm done, and that's all I'm doing. I don't need to worry about like going on vacation with coworkers and goofy stuff like that, like.
But on the other hand, it's dangerous in a way too when you work a job like that, because it's very easy to start separating yourself from everything. And we talk about this all the time. We're at home, both of us, all day long, every day. We're workaholics.
Yeah.
So it's nothing for us to go months without talking to another human being outside of Facebook, which is dangerous.
Yeah. So, that can definitely catch up to you.
Yeah, and you don't think about it. The same thing with hygiene. You can go 4 days and not have a shower, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
I stink.
Yeah, no, it's like, you just stop noticing. This is the most embarrassing thing in the world. I had a pest control guy tell me that I need to shower more often. And
just so you know, I did shower before I came over.
No, that's fine. Well, I was gonna say you have dreadlocks, and that's cool. And I realized at 32, like, okay, John, it's time to stop acting like an idiot. Wash your clothes and just take a shower every day. It's fine. Make the time. Like, I'm not standing against any political system by not showering. It's like I get out of a truck and it smells like butt, and it's like, I probably should go home and shower.
Yeah, I feel like a hypocrite too, because I tell my son to get a shower every day. He's preteen now, so and I don't.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. How long have you had your dreadlocks, by the way?
Not very long. I actually started them earlier this year.
Oh, okay.
They're fairly new.
I'd wondered. My wife wanted to put hers to get hers to lock in, and she just has always had trouble with it. And,
oh, really?
And I'm not super good at having long hair. Like, I had a top knot until a week ago.
Oh,
2 weeks. Yeah. No, I came home from vacation. I got tired of having sweat and wet hair in my face, and I was like, all right, it's time to shave the head.
Yeah, there's upsides and downsides to it. I hate doing my hair. I'm not your typical girl. Like I hate getting done up and having like normal hair. You have to comb it. You wake up in the morning and it's kind of sticking off to the one side. It looks really stupid. But with dreadlocks, they always look the same.
Yeah.
So I wake up in the morning, they look the same as they do when I go to bed. So it's kind of nice not having to comb my hair and go through that daily ritual.
Yeah.
And I do wash them.
Yeah, that's the one thing. There's no funk coming out of your hair, because some people
always the first question is always, do they stink or are they gross? I'm like, well, no, you do wash dreads. It's not like you can't wash them.
Once they're locked in, you can wash them. But I do know some people that have dreads, and it is just not. It's because they don't maintain their hair.
Yeah.
And like.
It's just
bro,
smelly.
Your hair smells like foot. That's no good.
I care a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, I was gonna say 9 times out of 10, that's dudes, because dudes are just not super into maintenance. So obviously, they're not into maintenance enough to give themselves dreadlocks, and then they're like, they stay there forever.
Yeah. So far, I like them. I mean, who knows? In the future, I might change my mind, but I'm comfortable with them right now. So
well. So this is my biggest curiosity, is that you run Wailing Wizard, and you are super into fantasy art. Where did that come from?
I think it came from the fact. So, like I said, it's not so much the case anymore. But when I was younger, my family was very religious. We were. I don't know if you've ever heard of Brethren.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've heard of them.
We wore the sin sifters on our head.
Oh, okay. Oh, is that what that is?
That's what I call it.
I gotcha. I didn't know.
It's a net. So we wore nets on our head.
Okay, yeah.
And, I from a young age, I questioned everything. And, and we weren't, it was kind of frowned upon at the time to, like, Harry Potter and magical things. They were evil. So, it sounds really strange when I say it now, because I don't think my family is in that mindset anymore. But at the time, I think... overall, there was a kind of a reaction to those ideas of magic and fantasy as being, and comic books too, as being this sort of, I know there was a lot of Christian backlash against that.
There was a lot of backlash against that.
So I think it was a general idea that it was bad, and I don't know if it was ever really verbalized why. But I remember when I was young, I was always interested in art. I was always drawing. I was always painting, and I would watch Bob Ross, and I would sit there with my little easel and make these horrible, I still have some of them, they're the worst paintings ever. And you know, I was always fascinated with what I wasn't really allowed to be interested in, and that was one of those things where it was like I was allowed to kind of be interested in these things, but Harry Potter was off limits, and there were certain things where it was like, this isn't okay, and like, you can like art, but there can't be nudity. And I remember I got an art book from my mom. It was this big encyclopedia for Christmas, and she went through the whole thing and with permanent marker and scribbled out all the naked body parts.
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, oh, that's just so awful to take that and just, you know, you wouldn't do that to a Bible, right? You wouldn't it's just like sacrilegious, you know. So I always had this fascination with what I wasn't supposed to be interested in. And then, of course, over the years that changed, and it was, they don't care anymore. Things have changed. But, you know, I don't know. Maybe that's where it started. But yeah, I was never exposed to a lot of fantasy anything.
Yeah.
So
well, I was gonna say, from the paintings that you made, and just on a side note, it seems like the Brethren and Mennonite lifestyle is really sensible for big families, because then you have order and reason to having a simple life, like to simplify everything so that everybody's thoughts are in order and you're not trying to chase down chaos all the time. It seems
and I was
really
chaos.
sensible. Yeah.
So it didn't work well for me.
No, it seems like, especially with like farm families in the area and all that stuff, like you have 14 kids. No, you should put a system in order to make sure that all those kids aren't like just out shooting up junk or kids and all that
you know,
stuff.
Everybody's different. My brothers and sisters, they liked being homeschooled. They liked the way that they had friends. And so I'm not going to sit here and try to say that it was wrong, because I wouldn't be the person I am if I wasn't brought up the way that it was. So I don't think badly about it. It's just, that's kind of how I became who I am.
I totally get that. But no, I was going to say on the vein of your art, I'm actually like surprised that you didn't spend the 90s reading Dragonlance or playing Dungeons and Dragons or
and that's where the whole fitting in thing comes from, is that you know, people look at my art and they make these comparisons, and there's this sort of assumption that I'll have some knowledge where that's concerned, and I don't, and I'm always a little bit embarrassed. Like, I'm, as an adult, I've taken interest in that, you know, but I'm still learning because it's all new to me. So, you know, people talk about Magic the Gathering, and you know, I've heard all of these terms, and I'm like, what is that? And then they look at me like I'm crazy.
Well, your style, like the style that goes into fantasy art, yours is just so polished and so beautiful that it is absolutely mind bending. That like, you didn't read like the Dark Elf trilogy as a 12-year-old and like everything popped. No, that's super weird.
But I look, you know, I used to be really embarrassed by it, but I'm not so much anymore. Only because I look at it and I'm like, well, at least I know what I'm doing is pure.
Yeah.
So it's definitely me. But on the other hand, you know, it is kind of embarrassing to stand in front of people who are like, oh, I like your art, and then I can't relate to them. You know.
That it's just that is kind of like a mind bender. That it was just. Because that's the thing with me, with my love of just commercial art. It's just the simplicity of it. I know that I need to pick 4 colors, and I need to figure out where those 4 colors are going, and then I need to screen print them, and I just need to make the stencil, and like. But yours is so well done from start to finish. Like, the piece that you put up of the dragon sitting next to the mushroom, which
in the marijuana plants.
Yes, I was gonna say I didn't realize there were marijuana.
It is.
Makes sense now, because I thought it was an Amanita muscaria, which was the quote-unquote magic mushroom, which through lots and lots of research, that's not true, folks.
No, it's actually a he's surrounded by marijuana.
That's great.
Yeah, he's smoking.
Yeah, and the way that all the lines are done and everything, it looks. You have that. My wife has that same knack where she could paint something and it doesn't matter what it is. She has that finished look. That
yeah, the polish.
yeah, it's done and everything's right and all the lines are right, and there's just something about it, like when you take like when I compare my art to it or with some other people's art to it, it's like, okay, well, yeah, it's kind of like taking a picture with an old camera where the lens is just slightly out of focus, and you know something's wrong with the picture, but it works.
Yeah.
But then, like, I look at your work and I look at my wife's work, and I'm like, I just wish I knew how to do that, because I have no clue.
Yeah, I don't even know how to verbalize that. I mean, it's a progression, I guess. I mean, I'm very OCD, which probably plays into that. I'm very particular. Like everything has to be just so all the time, and I drive myself crazy, with all of this perfectionism. And I'll sit down and I'll be like, I'm gonna do this painting real quick, but it's never real quick. It's like 40, 50, 60 hours later, and so I'm not very prolific because I don't have the time to paint, but
I was gonna say that may be my issue too, because I have never spent 40 or 50 or 60 hours on anything.
Yeah, I've never spent less than 30 hours on a piece that's painted. If it's drawn or pen and ink, I can do it much faster. But I like painting, so there's a part of me that's like, well, I could do more work if I change what I'm doing. But then on the other hand, I enjoy painting, so I'm okay making, spending 40 hours on a piece. It's just that it would be nice to make more than one piece every 2 months. So.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I think you getting ready for like a 40-piece gallery show would take you
it'd
nearly
be like 12
a lifetime.
years.
Yeah,
yeah. Somebody said to me, I did that tarot card piece for the Dark Art Tarot deck. It's like a collaborative deck that we're working on, and I did one card. And somebody said, hey, you should do a whole deck. And I was like, I'll be dead before I could do a whole deck.
I was going to say, that's on my list of things to bring up with you, because I just I realized earlier, like, oh, don't take notes, just find points. And it's like, you did the Two of Wands for the Dark Art Tarot project. And that's a really cool project. And your
fun,
card specifically really stands out.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was really excited because, the guy who started, he's actually based out of Australia. And he just approached a lot of artists that kind of run in similar circles online. We all run into each other all the time and, chit chat and like each other's work. And he came up with this idea and just reached out he found 78 different artists to contribute, so each card is different. And one of them is Paolo Girardi. He does a lot of album covers.
Oh, okay.
So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I was gonna say, once you walk off of Main Street with me, I don't know who you're talking about.
You should definitely check him out. He does I forget where he's from, but he does these really, really amusing videos where he'll paint and listen to like new metal and like it's really, and he never has a shirt on.
Oh geez. So
he's really fun to watch, and he's on my Facebook friends list because I just find his posts so amusing. The other day he posted a picture of his underwear drying out in the sun. And he told me, well, he said in the comments, he said he shat himself when he went in to look at the artwork.
Oh geez.
So but the guy, he's really he does amazing work, and I think he's pretty well known in the metal circle. I'm not a huge metalhead, but
you seem like you would be, but you're not. Way to go and break the mold again.
I know. It's funny. My husband's a huge metalhead, and we actually play music together in our bedroom. And we'd started this whole cultic thing where it's like me and him, and he plays guitar and I play drums. But I'm not a metalhead, so that's all. I'm one of those people that. So nobody ever told me I couldn't do things, so I just do them, and I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. So.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that though, because it's just sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, and the journey of discovery is more fun than anything else.
Yeah, and I run in a lot of the metal circles with him. I love going to shows. I don't even have to know who's playing or know anything about. I just enjoy being there, and I feel like a certain community with metalheads.
Yeah, so. They're pretty easy to get along with, and I tell you what, most of them that don't have Guns N' Roses patches on the back of their vest
Yeah.
are some of the most intelligent, fun people to deal with.
Yeah.
I'm just
yeah.
kidding, Guns N'
No,
Roses
no.
fan by the
Well,
way, fans by the way. No, but that's the one. Like metal is one of those things where it's a facet of a lifestyle of people who they don't really fit in, and they don't fit in because they're born extremely intelligent, and
Yeah.
they're always curious, and they're digging into books, and they're digging into
Yeah.
weird stuff, and it's like,
and in
well,
that way, I feel like I fit in.
Yeah.
And I don't have to. I don't know what band played what and what year they played it, but
yeah.
I don't think that's the broader idea behind metal. I view it as more of a culture of
Oh, definitely.
similar minds.
And you can definitely take it too far, but I
Yeah.
mean, you can definitely get caught up in the culture of it instead of the whatever else you want to say about it,
Yeah.
like the fun of it or the necessity
Yeah.
of it. But yeah,
Yeah, and it works for me. I mean, we're gonna go to Shadow Woods this year. We've gone every year.
That sounds familiar. What is that?
It's in Maryland. I forget it's right over the border. I forget the actual name of the area, but Mary, I want to say Spiro. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her last name. Sorry if it's wrong. She started doing it, I think 3 years ago now, and it's basically a 3-day metal festival that's in the woods, and you get to camp out. So every year we've been, it's been perfect weather.
Yeah.
You get to camp out in the woods, which is fun. She has multiple stages. Some of them are inside, some of them are outside. So it's a really fun experience, and you have this sort of laid back environment where you're in the woods. It's a campground, and
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, it's really fun to just be there. Even if you're not into the music, but the music is incredible too. And there's this sort of mix of metal and some darker folk music. And the Owls are playing. Brian's band is playing there this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Isn't I was gonna say, don't they do a very specific version of metal? A whole day of it. I forget what it's. Isn't it like Celtic? Not Celtic. I forget. I was gonna say, I know I've heard of it before, but yeah, those kind of things, they are. Even if for example, Muddy Roots is down in Cookeville, Tennessee, and it's the last weekend of summer, whatever holiday that is, Labor Day. I can't remember. Anyway, so it started it's on a farm, and it's just a music fest, and it's very it's very punk influenced, not punk music.
Okay.
So it's like alternative. I hate the word alternative now. Thanks.
Ouch.
Thanks the media. No, like alternative country and folk punk and all kinds of weird stuff. And like the weekend, my wife and I went down, and it was 3 days camping in a field, and it was great. And Black Flag current version of Black Flag ended it, and it's super fun. And it's just, yeah, you're right. The atmosphere of it is sometimes more important than the bands that you're gonna go see.
Yeah, and the people too. And there's a lot of great people that go to Shadow Woods, and it's not a huge fest, but I mean it's grown over the years, and I think people feel really connected to it.
Yeah.
On a personal level, and that's
and when, not to say small as a disparaging word, but when it is small, you're building you're building the oyster, or you're building the pearl inside the oyster, and you get to always feel that. Like, it's that kind of stuff's super fun.
Yeah, we've met some really cool people there too. So they're on my Facebook friends list.
Yeah, there you go. And I was gonna say, to go back at, like, that's one of the fun things is like go do something completely out of the norm. Like when we went to Muddy Roots, it was the year we got married, so 2012.
Okay.
And we went 2012, and while we were there, like, we were just complete strangers in a crowd of 9,000, and met some friends of ours that turns out they're from Reading, so I see them often.
Okay.
And I get to make the effort to go see them, because they're not, Reading's not that far. It's about an hour and a half.
Yeah, an hour or so. Yeah.
And so to know that, the Jason, the kid that we met, and his girlfriend or wife, I can't remember. Jason runs the Sick Art Sideshow.
Oh, okay.
And so, like, the Sick Art Sideshow comes down to the White Rose Tattoo Convention, or War the Roses Tattoo Convention. Not White Rose, it's the one out in Lancaster. So But like they do all those events, so I get to go see them, and you're like, oh, that's what your parents did. You know, like
Yeah.
back before your parents were constantly interconnected with their friends. It's like, yeah, they'd see them like that's why when you were walking around the mall and your mom would see somebody and you'd be there for 45 minutes because they haven't seen each other in
Yeah.
8 years, and this is just random happenstance because people didn't rely on friendship that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's the weirdest. That's the strangest thing about now is the like growing up, my parents seemed like they didn't have friends.
Yeah.
And it seemed like they didn't do much, but when they did it, if my stepdad went to a friend's party at work, like it was the biggest thing that they were going to do.
Yeah.
And like nowadays, any Friday you go down to First Friday and there's all your friends and all their kids and all their kids' friends, and it's like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
Because I can keep up with your life on digitally, and then I can keep up with you constantly, and it's, I don't know.
I don't know if it's a good thing. Like, we were talking too about how people, you used to know people at certain stages of your life, and you move on and you lose contact with them, and maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Yeah.
And with social media, those people are there all the time, and then you have to wonder, is it good to always be in the same group of friends or I don't know, it's
that's a good question, because the example I could make was I tried to set up my best friend from high school on a blind date couple of weeks ago, and this is 2017, and this was not with somebody that he knew on Facebook. This is not somebody I know on Facebook. It's a girl at my work.
Okay.
And she's from dealing with her, she seems nice, and he's single recently, whatever, and like, oh, you two should hang out. And he looked at me like I'm going to throw him in a van and kill him. I was like, dude, people did this all the time. Why don't just break out of you got to break out of the thing. Like if
the
you're
comfort zone.
Yeah. You're going to go to the depot every weekend, and you're going to see the same people at shows, and you're going to wait for one of them to get single, and it's like, and then you're going to be stuck in that same routine. It's like, just break out and do something weird for the sake of doing it.
Because that's when things happen, when you go outside of your comfort zone and take some risks or chances or whatever.
And it definitely could be good, and it definitely could be bad.
It could be bad, but you'll remember it.
No, that's like absolutely a new life event. Like, it's something weird that you could do. And look, if you lose a leg over it, you're never going to forget that.
Yeah.
But that is the odd thing, is everybody's interconnected. And if you shake hands with somebody and introduce yourself, all of a sudden you're friends on Facebook, and all of a sudden their face is always there. It's like, just leave me alone.
I always feel a little bit too like, okay, I feel like I know you, but I don't know you,
Yeah.
And it's like this weird, it's almost depressing sometimes, where it's like, you're probably a really cool person, but I don't know you.
Yeah.
When people post things on social media, it's very much what they want you to see.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this sort of disconnect. There's this personalization, and I don't know, I'm guilty of spending a lot of time on social media, but part of that is that I've never really had a lot of friends outside of that either, and I wouldn't say that I feel lonely or sad about it, but I'm not one of those people that just goes out and meets people. I'm different,
Yeah.
So,
I have trouble. I was gonna say, going out and meeting new people is really strange.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing that now.
Yeah,
but
and that's the thing with this is like, look, it could go good or it could go bad, but I've opened up to somebody, or I've gotten somebody to open up, and the time that. So, I was gonna say. So on the subject of not knowing anyone, is like, you have regular friends. You have friends that you know of that you're completely comfortable to be around. But when was the last time you actually sat down and talked to them?
Yeah,
and actually, and had a full depthy conversation that wasn't like, oh, check out this whatever link I shared. That wasn't, oh, look at what I did this week on the internet. It's more like, oh yeah, shit's been weird lately. You know.
Yeah, I think too it's tough, and maybe that's just a natural thing too as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
Like I look at my parents and my grandparents, and I think about their friendships, and they're very much, how's the weather today, kind of. And so maybe too, as you get older, you start to somehow disconnect yourself in some weird way. I don't know, or maybe I'm just lousy at being
No,
a friend.
I wouldn't say disconnect, but I would absolutely say that you start to zero in on who you want to be around the most.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I've gotten to that point too where I have, I don't know, Facebook just celebrated the fact that I have nearly 1,000 friends, and I
Oh
was
no.
like, I could not borrow $5 from most of these people, so I don't think we're really friends. But
Yeah.
it's like I have that, and then I like, I have a large group of people that I go see and that I can go see in person, and I know who I need to go see and when.
Yeah.
Like if I'm feeling rough and I just need somebody to brighten my day, I go see, I'll take time out of my day and go see sumo, or it becomes like you realize how to the utilization of people is always going to be there.
Yeah.
It seems like once it comes out of my mouth, like, oh, that's the most offensive thing you could do to somebody. It's like, no, but like I'm super depressed today, and a friend of mine who I know was suicidal as a kid, he knows how to relate to me, so I need to go talk to that person immediately. It's
Yeah.
not like you're not using people, but you do
Well,
know how
that
to emotionally fill yourself the way you know you need to be
yeah.
now that you're older. Like
Yeah.
now that we get older.
I think it's important to do that too, and I'm guilty of not doing that because I'm a very closed person. So when I do feel something, I internalize it rather than reaching out to anyone, which is dangerous. I think
Yeah, it can be.
especially I'm a very negative person too. So it's a good thing Brian's around because he always knows when something's wrong, and he just will not let it go. He'll
Yeah.
stand over my shoulder and just, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?
Yeah, I do. I was gonna say that sounds incredibly familiar, and I know that same process of how to dig how to
Yeah.
dig through somebody's ice. And
Yeah.
hey, warm up, come on, we're missing fun right now. What are we doing?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm a realist too, which makes it worse because I always look at things and I go, well, I'm feeling emotions, but realistically, they're just emotions, and I should ignore them. So in my head, I'm always just rationalizing. It doesn't stop you from feeling something or thinking something, but somehow I can just turn it into this really scientific thing,
Yeah,
and
and
just deny it until it's
yeah,
gone, but it never really goes, it's still there.
it's just waiting. That yeah,
Yeah.
that I was gonna say it gets harder as the years go by to just really even gain a hold on anything in this world. Like it just
Yeah.
it's such a strange thing that I know if ship starts sinking and the sky starts to burn, I live with a person that I want to be nearest whenever that happens. So
Yeah.
I'm square in that notion, but at the same time, yeah, I get into these modes where I'll go for months without going out. I'll go for I just won't do anything. I have people that I text every day, people that I call every day that they keep me in reality, but other than that, I'm just here and hiding out, and
Yeah.
it's like it feels really good, but at the same time, I feel really bad about it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like I'm always fearful that I'm missing something.
Yeah.
I'm always fearful that I'm missing something fun.
Yeah.
So, hey, my dogs are home. Yeah. But yeah, that is the weird thing. And how doesn't matter how I ask this question. How many kids do you have?
I have one.
Okay. Okay.
No, he's I had him when I was quite young. I
Oh,
was
okay.
19, so he's actually he's going to be 12 soon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I feel old when I say that, but he's a
Mm.
good kid. He's very much like us. He's a workaholic, and
Yeah.
I left the house today, and he was like, "Remember what I told you?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Just remember what I told you." Well, he told me everything will be fine. I just need to talk.
Yeah.
Be myself.
That's
So,
I was gonna say
he's
that's
a
a
smart
really
kid.
wise kid.
He is.
So
He is.
that's
But
that's the it always seems like a point of contention from being a 32-year-old man without kids, like asking people, because I am really mystified by it.
yeah.
I think it's one of the most terrifying things that you could ever do or deal through. But at the same time, like no matter how many negative stereotypes people have towards young pregnancies, or how many times I've said the worst things in the entire world as a joke,
Yeah.
and like no matter how many times that's happened, like it is really mystifying to see people deal through that and then still have like super awesome kids and still have a life on top of that. Like,
yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, Brian and I have been together for 10 years. So
mm,
my son Gage, has always known him as his dad. I mean, he was 2
yeah,
basically.
there's
So,
nothing wrong with that.
yeah, so it's a little different for us. It's not like he came into the picture later, but, I think for me, it was kind of a awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you're young and you're doing a lot of dumb things, and at the time I was in a very abusive relationship with his father,
Mm-hmm.
and his birth kind of snapped me out of that, and it gave me this sort of weird strength where I was like, I need to leave this situation and I need to create a world for him that's better than what I've opted to do for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And being a depressed person, I was willing to accept the situation, but when it came down to, is this the life I want for him, it changed everything. And I wouldn't have met Brian if I wouldn't have moved on from that. And I'm glad that things worked out the way they did, and he's a great kid. So
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And like, yeah, I got my stepdad when I was 2, or no, when I was 3. So he was all, he's the guy who raised me. He's a great
yeah,
dude. But yeah, that it just seems like situationally people look at that and they're like, "What are you doing with yourself?" It's like, well, somebody once told me, because I am a depressive. Somebody once told me, like, have a kid, your life will change entirely. I went on drugs instead. So
yeah.
I mean, it's just how I decided to
Yeah.
do it. But
Well, I didn't really plan it,
yeah,
but it did change my world in a good way. But that was, I mean, how much of that was me making the right decisions, or how much of it was just coincidence? I
yeah,
don't know. I mean, but it's definitely changed our world for the better. And he wasn't planned, but I couldn't be happier.
yeah. No,
So,
that's all. That's rad.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's really cool. And like, I am getting to that point in my life where I need to decide whether I'm going to or not. And
yeah.
like it, I know every 90s sitcom, that was the joke. Like, oh, my clock is ticking. Oh, my
Oh
clock is
no.
ticking. And like, it was always ladies, and they're like, oh yeah, my internal clock's ticking. And it's like, oh no, that happens for dudes too. And like
Yeah.
that,
Well, and if you're not terrified of parenting, then there's something wrong.
y-
That's
I
how I view it.
I'm scared to death of it.
It
Like,
is terrifying, and you know, every decision you make is not just about you anymore.
yeah,
It has a very serious impact on another person's life, and that's a terrifying thing. So
yeah.
you should be afraid of it.
Well, I was gonna say, and that's the thing, is like your perspective on it, that decision or that realization came to you so early on. Like, that is the difference between a healthy, fulfilling life and a life of all the shit I dealt with as a kid because my mom
Yeah.
was 17.
Yeah, and I think that I mean I'm sure everybody handles the situations differently.
Yeah.
I take parenting so seriously that Brian didn't even meet Gage until we were dating for over 2 years.
Oh wow.
Because I was so afraid I'm going to bring someone in and then it's not going to work out, and then they're going to. I don't want people in and out. So I
Yeah.
just created this situation where maybe I don't know if it's good or bad, but I kind of had this mentality that this is my responsibility and I take this so seriously that I'd be better off single because I then to make the wrong decisions for us,
Right.
and that's why I left his father, at the time, and so glad that I did. but like I said, it gave me a different perspective on things being a parent, and it's not easy, to parent, and I don't think anybody gets it right, but we all do the best that we can.
Yeah.
So,
And
you know,
I agree with you 100%. There's no way to ever do it right.
yeah,
I just
yeah.
feel like
there's
that's
no recipe for.
yeah, like, you can read every book on the shelf that teaches you how to parent. You're never
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
until you realize that most of the drivers are innate. They're inside of you, and if you have them, it's gonna go okay. And if you
Yeah.
don't have those kind of alarms inside your genetics that tell you how to keep this little thing safe forever.
Yeah.
If you don't feel that way, like, shit's gonna go downhill, and books
Yeah.
aren't gonna help you.
Yeah.
So like,
But I also look at that too, and I always say, well, everybody has their own experience
Mhm.
from being a child, and we all have negative and positive things. I feel like I was pretty lucky. There's things that I wouldn't do as a parent that my parents did, but sometimes that's what makes you who you are too, you know. And as an adult, I think people who've experienced some trauma are sometimes more
apt.
Yeah. And so to just negate that and say, well, I mean, that was your experience, and you know, as parents, we don't get it right all the time. And our kids, I think as kids, we always look back at our parents and make judgments about how much better our lives might be if they had made the right decisions. But then on the other hand, you wouldn't be who you are if it weren't for what your past experiences were and how they got you to where you are now. And so, you know, and the same thing with, you know, being with his father and being in that situation. I would not choose to do that again.
Yeah,
but
no.
you know, I learned a lot, and I think it made me a better person. So
Yeah,
it's all relative. It's all in how you decide to take your experiences, maybe, and you know, utilize them and become the person that you are now. And you have power over that as a human being. So that's
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
And without the bad, you don't have the good. You know, so you need you need one in order for the other to exist. And
there was a study once that said if what was it? By the age of 12, if you have all the wealth in the world and nothing to fear, you will more than likely die of a heart attack very early in your life, because it's natural. Having things to overcome. I'm butchering this, but having things to overcome is what makes us physiologically stronger.
Yeah.
And they did a long study, and they found out, like, people that don't have any issues, like Genghis Khan's kids had everything by the time that they were growing up. So Genghis Khan had this long campaign to destroy the world, and he did a great job of it. And then he died, and then his kids took it over, and they fucked it up.
Yeah.
Just like the pretzel company. You know, like, the old man that ran the pretzel company passed away, and then his kids came in, and the pretzels just don't taste the same, and then his two kids had to fight with each other, and now we got two pretzel companies using the same goddamn recipe, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And that's a super local reference that my one fan in the Philippines is not gonna get. But yeah, like, it's odd. Like, it's odd to even ask people about it, because it's such a it is absolutely a private thing.
Yeah. But I think we all experience it in that way too.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing about trauma, is that I mean, the same thing happens when people pass away. You know, in our family, somebody passed away that everybody was very close to, and it was this trauma where everybody was experiencing the same feelings, and yet we still couldn't come together. You know, and there was this sort of, well, I should feel this stronger than you because I have this relation to this person, and rather than being able to really just come together and be on the same plane, there's this sort of like a, you know, everybody's feeling their pain so individually and separately from each other. And I think that's the nature of pain, is that it makes you feel separated.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree. When my grandpa passed away and everything just dispersed.
Yeah.
It was like, and he was just a dude who liked to, like, he was 60, I think he was 68. When he was 65, he fell off the roof because he was busy working and just didn't care. He was fine. Like, just a grumpy old man who got the work done, didn't care. Like, he was always there, but he wasn't always ready to be personable or ready to be interactive. But if you need him, you could run to him. And, like, everybody was like, oh, he was the glue that held this family together. It's like, no, well, maybe he was, but maybe we're just all being assholes right this very second. And like,
or maybe you could be the glue. You know?
Yeah, it's like, I mean,
everybody kind of, and I get it. I get that, you know, when you feel pain, it's hard to look around you and see how other people are feeling the same things, and to kind of excuse their behavior based off of that, because we say dumb things when we're feeling bad. So
oh, absolutely. No, yeah.
Know? But
ask anybody that's been with me during a mental collapse when I'm at my most furious. Ask the most insane things that come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, they're gonna happen that way.
Yeah. It's just is what it is, right?
Yeah, just deal with it or don't. And I try not to anymore, and I'm okay.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it all comes full circle. So, I mean, without the pain, you can't have the good times. So I think people who experience pain also have a greater appreciation for the good things in life too. So, yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah, it makes it it makes it better to know that I finally found a point where I have a career instead of a job. But the 10 years that I worked when I just had jobs, it's like they were miserable, and it's like, oh, well, I finally found this place, and this is awesome. I just do my thing, and I'm happy, and I got a career now, and that's so weird because I'm old.
It helps, it helps to have a sort of,
solid footing.
Yeah.
And that's once that happened to me, and I had that realization, I realized that everything I've ever wanted in my entire life, apart from anything else, was I just wanted security. Just to feel secure for half a minute,
Yeah, I can relate to that. I'm sure.
Wait for the wave of chaos. Like, it's like I can set up this tent and wait for the wave of chaos to come. But man, I'd really love to be in that treehouse. How do I get into that treehouse? And until you get there, you never know. You just don't know how it's going to come.
Yeah, it's really easy too to convince yourself that there's nothing to look forward to, and you're sitting here, we're living proof that there is, and but you have to get over that hump. So
and I was gonna say, you have to get over the hump, and you have to get over the fears, and sometimes you just got to take that one, like, as dull of a statement as that is, that the first step.
It's like what everybody tells you to do, but you don't really understand it until you do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why would I want to do this? Why should I stop drinking? Dad, just because you were a drunk doesn't mean I'm gonna be a drunk.
Yeah.
I was a fucking terrible drunk. I got beat up once. I got beat up once by my previous best friend. I'm not sure if he listened to this or not, but I was being an asshole. And to bring it all around, I was saying terrible things to him.
Is now the time for an apology?
Sorry, Paul. I still don't want to hang out, but I do apologize in case you're listening to this. I'm a terrible person, and you're mean, and I'm mean. It happens, whatever. I just don't want to hang out anymore because I don't care. It's okay. I'm okay without you. You're okay without me. We'll be fine.
That's funny.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have a sudden exegesis at the bowling table. I don't even know what to call this, the conference table. I have a conference table.
This is a really nice table. Do you actually use it?
I do. I've used it for everything. It was a computer desk. I finally brought it up the other day. Computer desk, I'll probably do screen printing on it at some point. Like, it's super...
Are you thinking about taking up screen printing as a business, or just...
No, just for fun.
Just for fun.
Look, because I did this yesterday, and
nice.
And my artwork sucks because I do everything by hand, and like, you could say that's my style, or you could say there's a guy rushing through everything that he's doing, and sometimes it's appealing. You could say it that way too.
That's the beauty of art, is trying to define what it is, where it came from, and what it means.
Yeah, I went like the font in this. Like, I have a fascination with typography. I find out to be one of the best things in the entire world. Don't worry about that. It might fall off. These are not
falling, drooping.
This is not the most expensive equipment in the world. But I have a fascination with typography, and Creature Skateboard Company has it has pointed edges, and then it's got like the dripping blood, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then I went to Wildwood, which is stuck in 1952. Okay. And every sign down there is like just it's a typesetter's dream. It's the most beautiful font work, and everything is that vintage atomic era bright colors and hard lines or soft lines, and it's just, it's perfect.
I miss that in design. I think there's not a lot of people doing custom hand-drawn typography and things in the design
There's
world
not
in
enough.
General. Yeah.
And if anybody does, I read I used to read Juxtapose magazine, and there was somebody in there that was doing it once, and to use the font that he was creating, because he was a graffiti writer. Okay. And it was a beautiful font, but to buy it was like $75.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not gonna pay you $75 for a font. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really neat to draw your own typography too. I mean, it's unique every time, and you can't get that out of something that it's a computer font.
And
So.
if you're willing to go the extra mile to actually develop a font fully with uppercase, lowercase, numerals, everything, like that's a really fun thing to take on. I'm not sure why, but it is. And it just, to me, it's one of those fascinating things where the English language is only 27 letter, 26.
26?
26 letters.
26.
I'm sitting in front of 15 dictionaries. I should know this.
Pull one out.
But yeah, it's like 26 letters. And how do I get them all to look exactly like, oh, I drew this really kick-ass T. Like, I remember when we were kids when you used to do the 6 lines and you make the S. Like, how do I make every other letter look like that? That's the complex puzzle of it. And that's super fun to me. I'm not sure why, but that's what pops. Is just...
Brian always says when he creates something, it's a bunch of tiny little decisions that come together to make something bigger. And
yeah,
he'll stand over my shoulder and he'll be like, "You're making lots of decisions right now." And I never really thought of it that way until it was an outsider perspective. But I guess that is creating. It's this weird decision making process that you go through.
So how does that work with you both working at home? Like, do you ever find yourselves in a hostile territory at all?
You're not going to believe me when I say this, but no.
Yeah.
So we're weird. We're not, or at least I'm not an argumentative person. I'm very, in fact, any kind of conflict, I tend to be a runaway kind of person if there's conflict. So that might be part of it. But we get along really, really wonderfully.
I know there are thousands of people out there that would say that is total bullshit, but it's not.
It's not, and it's weird. I over the years, we're both jaded people.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. But you kind of start to weigh what's worth being upset about and what isn't.
Yeah.
So I sometimes I get irritated by dumb little things, but my immediate thought is, why does this matter? This isn't something that's worth fighting over. This isn't something that's worth being mad about. So, I mean, I have my moments where I get like irritated, like, you left the toilet seat up kind of things or whatever. Yeah. But outside of that, it's just, there's never been, we don't argue very often.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say we've never argued because we have, but we get along really well. We're best friends, and he's probably my only friend that I spend a lot of time talking to. So, it works out really well for us. We do similar jobs. We're kind of on the same plane on so many levels that it just works.
I got you. I'm always curious about that, because I do herald my marriage as something that is most important in this. It's like, the most important thing I'm dealing with is making sure that my relationship is maintained, and that's because it's a marriage and it's fantastic. And like, I try not to read statistics. I try not to read articles, because it looks like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Because according to everything in the world, like, marriage doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't work out. It blah 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 blah. It's like, no, but.
It's weird. I think and I'm going to say this, and I'll probably regret saying it, but we were together for 10 years. We just got married, but we've lived together, for 7 years now. So marriage to us was kind of just like a, do the paperwork, make it official or whatever. But we've basically been married the whole time, if you look at it for what it is. I think part of the reason we get along so well is that we don't have expectations for each other.
Yeah.
I don't look at him and expect him to provide me with anything. I look at him as a friend, and I look at him as somebody I like being around. But when I feel bad, I don't require anything from him in order to make me feel better, and vice versa. And I don't have unrealistic expectations about what chores he should be doing, but because I always viewed it, if you're in the relationship and you care about who you're with, you're going to do the best that you can if you care about them. So if he's not doing something I want him to do, or it's not because he doesn't care, and that's something I think you have to always remind yourself of, is that just because the other person may not be doing things the way you would want them, or may not be giving you what you think they should be giving you. You have to view, do they care? That's what really matters.
Yeah.
And to say that this person doesn't care because they're not doing it the way you would do it, that's not necessarily true. And I always said that if things are volatile, it proves that people still care. Because if there is that part of you that says, I need this from you, and there's that part of them that says, what the hell do you want from me? That it shows that you both care, and that you just can't necessarily come together on how to show it.
Yeah.
So that's how I always view things. And as a result, I'm usually able to in my head, go to a place where I can say, okay, what I'm feeling it because of this, but that's not necessarily your fault. That's me. That's me internalizing this. That's me turning this into something that is not necessarily something you even realize I'm doing, know? And how can I expect you to relate to me or to understand how I'm feeling if I don't voice to you what I'm feeling? And so we're just laid back people.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like you guys should just go on hikes and stand together. And you're like,
But on the other hand, I don't downplay because, like I said, people who argue, a lot of people are in great relationships and they argue all the time. We just don't. And again, I always, if you argue, it shows you care, because why else would you put all that energy into it?
Yeah, that's true, and it definitely has its limits. Like, no, argue all you need, argue as much as you need. But if you're screaming at each other and throwing knives across the room, that's a little too volatile.
You might want to take a step back.
Yeah, I feel like you might care a little too much, and somebody's gonna die.
Yeah.
But no, Ed, you too. I was gonna say your general lackadaisicalness and your love of art. You remind me of Alex Gray and his wife.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the psychedelic artist.
Yeah, I know who he is.
I love Alex Gray. His work is amazing. Didn't he do the artwork
for that DMT, the book about the DMT?
Yes, the Spirit Molecule.
That's it.
Yes,
yeah. I did not read it, but I believe Brian did.
Oh,
so.
I'm a huge fan of psychedelics. I'm not a user though.
Yeah.
Just in case DOT ever hears this, I don't use myself, and but I do believe in it. It feels like that. Whether or not, whatever hole I need to fill in this world, slipping out into a different reality because I champed down on some mushrooms, that's fine with me. Seems like a good place to go, and it's a good way to explore without leaving the house. Yeah, because the world out there is kind of scary.
It is. It's pretty scary. I will agree with that. I'm especially coming from the homeschool background and having to take those first steps out.
Had to be that had to be rough to go out, even to go to Bradley, which. I mean,
it's a fairly small school.
Did you commute, or were you on?
I just drove. Bradley's over in East York.
Yeah.
So I drove from Seven Valleys to East York.
That's not bad. No, I didn't know if you wanted to, like, if you decided this is it, I'm going to go do the full experience and lived on off-campus housing or anything like that.
I didn't do that. But, I was only in college for a year before I got pregnant. So I was actually pregnant and in college. So I worked as well. So I actually worked, interned, and went to school and had a baby.
Good Lord.
I didn't sleep much.
Yeah, I was going to say, when did you find the time?
No, and I would have the only reason I was able to do that was that my sister was willing to watch my son at the time, so that helped. But
it takes a village.
Yeah, he was 2 months old when I went back to college. I took off to have him for a couple of months, and he was 2 months old then when I went back. So it wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I'm glad I suffered through it.
That seems too rough. I get mad if I like the other day, my entire world would have collapsed because I forgot to take my medication before I left, and I thought about it all day, and I was just like, oh no, if I was in your shoes, I'd probably melt into the asphalt.
Yeah, there were a lot of tears, and I interned in Harrisburg too, so I had to drive to Harrisburg, and I would cry every day, just because I was so tired, and he was an infant, so he would wake up every 2 or 3 hours, and it was tough. There were some tough times.
Yeah, but you did stick it out and bettered yourself and did all that's. Super honorable. That's
crazy. And I can look back and I feel like I did the best I could. It may not have been perfect, but I tried really hard. So
no, that's what matters is you did try, and man, you fucking stuck the landing.
Yeah, yeah.
You have a well-adjusted 12-year-old at home.
Yeah, he's a good kid. He's a little like us, a little too much like us, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's actually he's teaching himself to build video games. So he'll.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's learning to use it's called Unity. It's a program that you
Got me.
Yeah, you write code and it does some of it for you, but you also have to do some coding. And he's crazy.
That's I was gonna say that's really neat, and that's really I'd wondered if, coming from your background, if you would let him just simply embrace the digital era, because it's kind of necessary.
And that's the thing. Some people go, "Oh, I don't want my kids on the computer all the time," and I don't want to. But then I look at it, and I'm like, he's teaching himself to do something that I couldn't even do. And I mean, there's the future of jobs. A lot of that is going to be in technology, I think, especially with just the way things are going in the US now. It's going to be tech jobs.
Oh, yeah.
And so I look at that and I'm thinking, well, he's passionate about this so much that he'll sit there for hours trying to figure out how to do it, and he'll figure it out, and he's learning and he's teaching himself and he's empowered by it. So I don't think it's a negative thing that he's, on the computer doing that. It'd be one thing if he was spending 24 hours a day playing video games but he's learning skills that are
I was gonna say it's balanced. And because I had that problem as a kid, or when I was in high school, is I could easily just go sit with my friends and play Halo.
Just check out.
And just check out reality. But
I did listen. I listened to a lot of TED Talks. Speaking of podcasts, and I was listening to one the other day, and of course there's downsides. You don't want to be sitting playing games all day long every day, but they did studies where they had proven that just 15 minutes of gameplay can actually enable people to open up to each other. And if you play games with somebody, they actually did tests on how much empathy a person can have for a stranger. And the amount of empathy that they had for this stranger changed so drastically with just 15 minutes of playing a video game.
Oh, wow.
So it does allow you to sort of socialize where maybe you wouldn't have been able to, and to have this weird sort of empathy that comes out of that. And it was actually measurable that they had similar empathy for a stranger as they did for a family member they've known their whole lives after playing a game with them.
Wow.
So it's I think there are positives and negatives.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. There's positives and negatives to everything.
Yeah.
Like, there's positives and negatives to anarchism.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it's like, of course there is. Like,
I mean, life's all about balance. That's life, I guess. But, I think that people are afraid of technology because it's new. And we don't know what the negatives are, and we don't always know what the positives are. So there's, I think that people go, oh, I don't want my kids just playing video games. But there are beneficial things to playing video games, too. So you have to be realistic, I think, and try to balance things. But
and I was going to say, and to specifically impede your child by not letting them envelop themselves in the things that they're gonna have to deal with, they're gonna have to deal with anyway.
Yeah,
it's like that's not the right way to go about it. Just that kind of sucks.
Yeah, and I think that is, whether people like it or not, whether the technology is kind of the future. That's what's gonna be their lives, and communication too. I look at most, with a lot of your hard labor jobs kind of fading, and there's not as much of that going on, and there's more tech jobs and things. The ability to communicate is so paramount to working in an office or working in an environment. Like, I have to communicate every day with my teammates, and even though I work from home, there has to be this constant line of communication, and the way that we communicate has changed drastically now that a lot of it is done online and on computers. And I don't know. I mean, whether you like it or not, that's how it's going to be. So
I agree, and that goes all the way back to what I was saying about self-driving trucks. I'd rather be involved in understanding how they work now, so that by the time I retire, I can hopefully enjoy them, and I'd rather just I'd rather just engross myself
Yeah.
in understanding the technology of it than
Yeah.
throwing on a Molly Hatchet record and crying behind closed
Yeah.
doors.
Yeah.
It just
And I
doesn't.
think we're always afraid of things we don't understand, and we
Yeah.
don't. I mean, it's all new to us. It really
Mm.
is. And it changes so quickly. Like technology, you think of the computers that my dad had when I was a kid, and it's a
Yeah.
dinosaur,
Yeah. Like the old Tandy 500s. That I mean, they
yeah,
were just
yeah, and
monsters, and like and more than obviously, media is always the social commentary on the time.
yeah.
And if you go back into the late 80s when they did not Ready Player One, it was during the Satanic Panic.
Ugh.
That movie with Tom Hanks where he got engrossed in D&D and went crazy or whatever. And you look at all the technology then, and every character in a movie is terrified of that technology that's coming,
Yeah.
because like Enemy of the State came out in 1996, and they're like, oh, they're surveilling us. And it's like, well, yeah, but my phone is sitting right behind me, and they could pop a mic on and know exactly what I'm doing right this very second.
Yeah.
And we welcome that now.
Yeah.
And the comment,
we know that we're being.
we do it, and we do it on purpose.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm willing to step out of my comfort zone and put up this. Like I'm just a
Yeah.
regular human being, and I'm talking to regular people, and they're coming on, and we're talking about stuff, and people are listening to it all around wherever they want.
And that's kind of the beauty of it. And of course there's downsides to that too. I mean, but the beauty of it is that everybody can express themselves in a public forum if they want to. Everybody can put what they're doing out there and have, it may not be a ton of people, but you can create something and you can put it out there, and just the fact that you can do that is pretty awesome. And there was a time when, people who created music couldn't necessarily find the proper outlets in order to publish it, or
Right.
but the downside to that is that there's so much of it out
Yeah,
there.
it's
You
like
know?
yeah, and that kind of thought was like, yeah, okay, so you need to go to a publisher with your creative work, and your creative work
Yeah.
needs to be good enough to be published.
Or
and
somebody
it's-
has to like it. Whoever looks at it has to like it, and maybe they don't, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But
Yeah, it does flood the market now, but at the same time, whatever you pick up on, it's there.
Yeah.
It's hard to filter out the noise. It's hard to filter out, like, especially with like writing books. Like people will just
yeah,
write
so
trash,
many, yeah,
trash.
yeah.
What I hate to disparage it, but just junk that's one book rehashed with new names, and it's
Like
put out as an
lazy,
ebook,
yeah.
and they have hundreds of titles under their name, and it's like, oh, they're hoping that somebody picks one and likes it, and then gets the next
Yeah.
one and all that, and they're trying to use it as a business model rather than a creative venture. And
Yeah.
it's hard to filter through all that and find the stuff that you like, but once you do, it's there.
Yeah.
It's like if somebody, if you get on the app store or whatever, the podcast store, and you're listening to stuff, and I come up in the stuff that's related or something you might like, and you listen to me and you like it, cool, we'll be
Yeah.
friends forever. And it's hard to get through that, but once you do, it sticks. Like, and and with media the way it is now, where everything is accessible, there is no more standard moral message or standard message that's coming out of everything that we're taking in, because you get people like you get the giant podcast, TED
Yeah.
Radio Hour, everything that's on NPR that I can't think of
NPR,
can't think of right this second, but and guys like Joe Rogan, who are modern day philosophers, and they're just there, and they're gonna tell you all about technology. And Duncan Trussell obsesses over virtual reality,
Yeah.
and there's no way to possibly pick up on any subject and take it from one very specific viewpoint. Of, if you wanted to be like, oh, well, I'm fearful of this, it's like, oh, well, there's 100 different shows that you can listen to about that, and
Yeah.
you're most likely going to end up so educated on it that you'd never be afraid of it again.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing that, like, being a child in the early 90s, is like, you can see the subtleties in all of the programming, and the way that news is set up to go into commercials, and what commercials are playing, and how everything's planned out.
Mm-hmm.
But now it seems in this era, there's just no way to maintain that kind of control.
Yeah.
Or
And maybe that's a good thing, you know.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really think it will be, because, you know, if we continue to believe that you need to walk down a certain path to be a success at whatever it is you do,
Yeah.
we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Because we're holding everything up as a bastion of heritage and a bastion of history, and it's like, yeah, but you know what? Bret Easton, stupid example, good example actually. Bret Easton Ellis wrote American Psycho, and he also wrote Less Than Zero. American Psycho was his first book, and he published it. It was a bestseller in his first year of college.
Oh wow.
So why did he stay?
Yeah.
Who cares? He's 19 years old, and
Yeah.
he hit for having a bestseller.
Yeah.
And then he wrote Less Than Zero before he was out of college. Like, was the necessity there for him to continue in that same line?
Yeah.
Or did it facilitate what he was doing, or was he just in his free time at high school writing about what's his name throwing a chainsaw down the stairs at a hooker? Yeah, it's like, is there a necessity to that? Yeah, some of those old foundations can't be torn down, but at the same time, they don't need to be lorded over everyone as, you know, the only way for you to possibly be successful in a creative venture is to do it exactly this way.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, with media is they really tell you, or at least for a period of time, it really kind of told people what's normal.
Mm.
And what you see in media is what you normalize. So this is what it means to be attractive. This is what it means to be, you know, interesting. This is what it means. And in today's, with all of, you know, the access to the internet and things, I think it's helped sort of change attitudes in a way. You know, I look at, for instance, you know, whether women should be thin. You know, and you look now at television, and now they're putting more normal, average-sized women in media, and it's as a direct result of the fact that online there's been this huge lashback about that issue, and women have said, "I'm normal, I'm attractive," and the media sees this, and then they play into that, but it gives people a certain power that we didn't have before, because it used to be that the media told us what is normal,
right,
instead of us telling them what we wanted. And as a result of the internet, we have this place where we can say, this is what we care about.
right.
And now they're feeding off of that, which is kind of a turning of the tables in a way it's kind of cool to see.
Absolutely. I think I think it might have been today, but Virginia is normal, NORML.
Yeah.
They're pro marijuana legalization.
Okay.
I'm pro. I don't use it.
Me
I don't
too.
care. I'm pro.
Yeah, I am.
But either way, they shared an article. I forget from where, but it was whoever's in office right now. I don't even like using his name, but the other guy too. I think it's Jeff Sessions that's like he wants to bring up prohibition laws and make them way super strict. They just posted an article yesterday that the expected result that he had for campaigning against marijuana is flatlining so bad that he's changing his position on it.
And that's
because
great.
Because the absolute majority of United States citizens couldn't give a damn about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
and it's funny, even people that, well, that's another side effect of having the open access to information on the internet, is that people that, even my own grandmother, there was a point at which she said, when my grandfather was sick, she said, I wish I could get marijuana, because she was hoping that would help him with his appetite. And I never thought there'd be a day where I'd look my grandmother in the eye and she was wishing that marijuana was legal. So it's changed attitudes, it's educated people, and we have more power than we used to in some ways, because that education is power.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. And then it takes, like, there was an article Monday in the Daily Record or Dispatch. I think it was a Dispatch, and it was about a local pastor who is pro medical marijuana because sat down with a girl with epilepsy who's taking cannabis oil and she doesn't seize anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not, whatever thought you have in your head as to what whatever your expectation is to legalization or even medicinal use, it's like, that's not what's going on here, man. We're not all gonna suddenly, not as soon as they legalize, everybody's not gonna smoke a joint and stop going to work.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. People are just gonna continue to do their thing, and they're not gonna do it in fear.
Yeah.
So
we were
what,
recently in Portland, and
Ooh.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was wonderful.
That had to be pretty fun.
Yeah, and it's funny how different. But I mean, I like everything. I can be realistic, and I can see that there are potential downsides because I am pro.
Yeah.
But in Portland, we had some taxi drivers that had conversations with us, and the downside for them was that just because it was legalized there, it brought so many people in who were not originally from Portland, and now they have higher crime rates and things. But that's more of a result of the fact that it's legal there and not anywhere else. But I can see how there are potentials for downsides for some people just because of going through those growing pains.
Yeah. Are you talking about Portland, Maine?
No, Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was legal all over Oregon.
I think it is in all of Oregon. But,
okay. Well, I know Portland, Maine decriminalized at some point, and people were like really stoked about it because that's let's be reasonable. Portland's the only town in Maine apart from Bar Harbor.
Well, we're getting there in Pennsylvania.
we are slowly but surely they're taking it down. They're kicking it down a notch from. It will no longer be a crime. It's still a crime. It's a citable offense. So you pay $100 the first time you're caught with an eighth on you, and you pay a little more the next time within 3 years. Yeah. And then you pay a lot more the third time within 5 years. Which whatever.
Terrible.
It's reasonable, and people just be let to do whatever they're gonna do, and but I realize my personality is just to leave people alone and not mind. It's just mind my own business. But yeah, you're right. People can take that too far. People can start walking down the street with lefties, and you're like, okay, look,
that's gonna happen with everything. I mean, you have to give people a certain amount of responsibility. Some people just don't make good decisions ever.
If you don't give it culpability, people will just take it as far as they can for whatever reason they want. It's like, okay, well, you got to be responsible about this.
Yeah, but there's always going to be, with anything that's great, there's always going to be the downsides too. It's kind of like with people. I always say their best personality traits are also their worst.
Yeah.
So it's just that's the reality of it. You can't make changes and not also have some, growing pains.
Yeah, but I'm here to. My biggest thing is I'd rather people felt love than anything else. Yeah, so just let people do what they're gonna do and leave them alone.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just smile at them, be happy, and walk away.
Yeah, there's fine. A lot of angry people right now.
I don't know why.
Maybe political reasons.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. But I feel like I'm at a point now where everything's been weeded out. That if I post anything political, fiery rhetoric, it doesn't matter. That's just 900 people that fucking agree with me. What's the sense in that? That's not even that's not even an argument. That's just me flying another flag.
It's not worth it. I always said that there's a certain amount of hubris to going into thinking that your opinion even matters.
Yeah.
Here I am talking about my opinion, but
now I was gonna say, once you get into it, you realize that, like, okay, well, I have friends that post very poignant things all the time, and they post a lot of stuff that I never would have looked into, and they post a lot of fiery rhetoric, and that's fine because I love them to death, and I don't mind.
You have to overlook it because it's not worth it.
The stuff I've learned in between, like girls using Patreon to sell nudes, okay, well, I needed to learn about that. I think that's super, not that I'm going to partake. I just find that... I find that super interesting that you're creating your own microeconomy through legal means, and I think that's fantastic. Yeah. And in between that, I gotta hear Bush did 9/11 for the 85,000th time. Yeah. It's like, come on, man, do something different. And my whole thing too is if you're that fiery about something, mobilize. Get out of your house.
Well, that's
Go
what I
do
always
a thing.
said, is that anybody can sit back and complain on Facebook. It's so easy to do that. But those same people won't necessarily do it to your face, and they certainly aren't getting up out of their chair and making any effort to change anything. So I don't know. That's one of those things where it's like Facebook's great because you can keep in touch with people, but it's also not great because it gives everyone a forum to complain.
And it's always either disconnected or concurrent thoughts that are floating around in circles, and it's like okay, look, if you post a meme about what's going on now, or you post an article about what's going on now, I am not going to give that the same respect that I'm going to give the first wave of Black Panthers. Because they walked around San Bernardino with guns.
They weren't posting memes.
To make sure that everybody was safe and police would stop brutalizing Black people. They're just walking around with loaded weapons. Yeah. Let's see you do that. Now, especially now. Let's see anybody do that. You know, it's like, I'm sure I'm going to alienate somebody through this thought. But like, you know, that's my thing is that, and especially this week, because I'm coming off of the anniversary of the race riots downtown. And I grew up near where 3 blocks away from where Lily Bell Allen was killed. Yeah. And it's a corner store now. It's been a corner store. And nobody's done anything about it in the past 48 years. But every time you walk past that corner store, you can see the bullet holes from that night. And nobody's willing to admit anything about it. Nobody's going to put up a mural. It's like, okay, well, I could sit here and bitch about it, but I would actually rather I'm going to start networking because I'm going to talk to that owner of that building, and I would rather put up a unity mural, anything. Because I know that there's no way to approach that without the stance of, okay, well, you know, Black victim, white victim, because Officer Shad was killed too, and he was a white guy, and that's all part of everything. And I agree. And there's so much to it, and there's so much history there.
It's complicated. It's not just
we should just put up a unity mural on that wall and let it be. Like that's how community grows, not by leaving a problem just ignored or just you know it's a bad spot and everybody avoids talking about it. And it's like, but it happened, and the people the residents of that neighborhood have to drive by that wall every day. Yeah. And it's like, we're not going to acknowledge it. Yeah. You know,
I think it's tough. It's tough. I think that there's a danger in viewing everything as one side versus the other. Yeah. And I think that's what people do. They're either one side's wrong and one's right, and everything's black and white. But in reality, life's not that simple. Yeah. You know, and you can't look at a situation like that and make it a one-sided thing. Yeah. I would say the same with politics. We always look at it as this is right and that's wrong, but it's not that simple. Yeah. What works, you know, the reason that we have two different sides, so to speak, and I know there's other, it's not just left and right.
No, there's some weirdos out there too.
Yeah. But I view it as, you know, what works for me, I can't assume works for everybody. And the right answer for one person isn't necessarily the right answer for everybody. So I understand that there isn't always a right or a wrong, and there isn't always one answer for everything. What really matters is being able to come together and find a balance that works for as many people as possible in any situation. And I think that everybody's so polarized. Yeah. And that's really sad to me to see that.
Absolutely, because with every statement that comes out of anything, especially in a political office, there's the ability to jump online and research it until you're bored of it. Yeah. And then feel like, okay, well, I don't even need to form an argument by understanding the other side. Yeah. Because I already know that I'm right. Yeah. And it's like,
and you've done all the research to make yourself feel like you have the answers.
But it's like, and it's not even good research, you know. That's the thing. Like, not to be a snarky asshole, but I'm excuse me. I'm sitting in a room full of my own books. Yeah.
Well, we all do.
Yeah. No, it's somebody. But it just reminds me of the thought that, like, okay, well, I may not be religious and I may not like religion, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to explore all of that. Yeah. It doesn't mean I'm going to turn myself off from all of that. Like, I would like to have I'd like to have a copy of the Turner Diaries, which is what what's his name read before he blew up Oklahoma City, Timothy McVeigh. because I need to gain a full understanding, not by just running through scopes or running through Snopes. It's like I need to know every facet of a thing before I can even pass a judgment on it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
Well, and I come from a religious background, and I'm not religious at all. I'm very I'm a realist.
Yeah.
I'm not. But I can see where religion comes from, and I'm always very interested in the psychology behind what makes people feel, think, do, believe in certain things. So I can look at that and I can see how it's valuable to somebody who's not me.
yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's like, that's the thing. People take that kind of stuff and then they start these tyrannical campaigns to make people just feel like shit for believing anything. It's like,
yeah.
I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in I want to know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I could take all the disappointment and disgust that I felt growing up in a church and just go start being a dickhead to people.
Yeah. I'm tempted to do that too. And I do complain a lot in my own time.
Yeah, but it's like I understand why it works for some people, and I understand the motivations behind it for them wanting to be a part of that, and then I understand the motivations behind the hierarchy of the church and how that's disparaging and how, you know, it's like you gotta give it you gotta give it purchase so that you understand something completely before you just spit out a headline at somebody and say I'm right.
And then when they're looking you in the face and you are having a conversation, you can be more empathetic, I think. And I think that's where people forget. They forget to have empathy when they have opinions.
When I was a fiery 13-year-old political advocate, I had no
angry.
empathy for anybody.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but I grew out of that, and I knew that, okay, well, I need to understand the other sides too. You know, it's like it just, people are just unwilling, and that is that in my personal opinion is one of the downfalls of having all of human knowledge in your pocket, is knowing that you can find what you're looking for, you can Google close to it, and they'll respell it for you, and they'll give you all the information you need, and then you can pretend like that's your learned information.
And it is dangerous too. I mean, the internet's full of false information as well, and you have to be real. I always laugh every time somebody shares one of those articles from like one of those fake news sites.
I read one about how that people are having Narcan parties now, and it's like, Narcan would kill you. Stupid. We're having an OD party. Get out of here.
But I do think some people are more inclined to believe than I am, because my first reaction to everything is to question it, and maybe that's not always a good thing either. So I don't know, but
that's like finding that moment where you're like, okay, are all these questions going to cause me to spend too much time on this simple act?
I
could just go along
and maybe
and
I'm
be done
losing
with it.
my mind. You know.
Like, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say, you know, I don't even remember. I lost my train of thought, but you know, you know what I mean.
It's just, it's like, people are just not willing to dig, and you got to dig, and sometimes digging can get you too far, and suddenly you're believing in Sasquatch. Which I'm totally fine with.
I don't believe in Sasquatch. But
no, and that's one thing I was gonna say. That's one thing I did want to ask you about. Your the Dark Art Tarot project.
Yes.
So, do you believe in the tarot?
You know, that's a funny question, and this is where I stand religiously. I hate to even go there, but I am not. Like I said, I'm a realist. I'm not a believer in anything terribly mystical, which is kind of funny because I do fantasy art. But I do believe that there is probably a scientific explanation for belief and for all of these things, because people create beliefs when they don't understand something. That's how I've always viewed it. So with tarot, I do think people have mystical things that happen to them. I think that maybe they do predict things, but I think that one day we'll have a scientific explanation for why and how that happens.
Right.
Does that make it less mystical? I don't believe so. I think there's so many things in the world that are so fascinating that we do understand, and that just because we just don't understand something doesn't make it any less amazing.
Right.
So in my eyes, I'm a realist. It will be explained at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is some truth to it, but it's not some mystical thing for me. It's more of something that we'll one day have an answer for, or if we don't, it's there. We're just not able to understand it or comprehend it because we're human beings and we have limitations ourselves. And,
Right.
so I do believe that these things happen. I do believe there's some truth in them, but
The why isn't.
There's going to be an explanation. There is an explanation, and it's a very real, tangible thing in my head. But that's how I am. I'm a realist, so.
I totally get that, and it's like, yeah, I don't. It's like I talk like how when I talked to Zach, it was just. Yeah, there's a lot of fun in it, but when it comes to the tarot or anything that is an implement of supposed mysticism, even the Ouija board, which was developed by Milton Bradley, commercial company, like I do get real Ouija about it. Like really, like I bought a tarot. I bought a deck of tarot
love tarot
cards.
I have tarot decks.
I love the artwork in it. I think they're fantastic. I've never shuffled it. I've never opened the box.
We have the H.R. Geiger one. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, no.
Oh, it's really cool.
And there's so many of them. Like, Welcome to Night Vale has a tarot deck, and like, it's just like, okay, do I buy them and play with them, or do I not? Do I just leave stuff be? It's real weird. Like
I've played with them before just as an experiment.
Yeah.
Like you said, I have a lot of questions. I want to know how this works. I'm interested in it. But again, it's not a spiritual thing so much for me as it is.
Yeah.
Like I would like to know how to explain this. And that is very interesting in itself. Is there any, is this something people are just convincing themselves of?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it does make you wonder whether or not it's like that point of assumed causality.
Yeah.
Because you never like there's 78 cards in that deck. No matter how many times you shuffle it, there's an improbable amount of shuffles that it could be. Yeah.
You can break it down scientifically and mathematically,
I was
right?
gonna say, if you break it down mathematically, a 52 card deck when it's brand new in the box, when you take it out and shuffle it the first time, there is a 1 in, I think it's like a 1 in 8 Google choice or chance that deck has been shuffled the same way. Yeah. Because which is really not that. Well, it's 52 to the 52nd power. That's a huge number. Yeah. And then you take 78 to the 78th power, and you're like, oh, well, that's bigger. And it just, you can definitely put math to it. But, and then you're sitting there and you're wondering whether, like, okay, if you get the death card, you're like, okay, well, is that immediate? Maybe not. Well, what do you mean? Maybe this is the week you stop eating triple cheeseburgers. Yeah. It could definitely help. I agree. Yeah. Well, and, there might be some power just in the power of suggestion. Because as people, sometimes those tools, I think, help us make decisions or help us feel motivated to do things we otherwise wouldn't have done. So that in itself may have some power, and there's, it may not be a mystical thing, but it's still it's still definitely thing. It's still definitely valuable. Thing. Yeah. So I don't downplay any of that because I can look at it and I can see how it benefits people, regardless of whether I believe in it or not. And the same thing with religion. It's also hurt people. Yeah. That's where I have trouble is when anything is utilized in such a way that it causes harm. And I think that's where the line has to be drawn. But really, human beings can take anything and utilize it in a negative way and turn it into a bad thing too. So, I look at religion and history and I see how it's been used as a catalyst to war and things like that. And that's where I have trouble with things like that. Like religion and belief is when people can
allow that to cause them to make the decision to do something horrible and
Yeah.
to do it blindly. But
Yeah.
I think that's more of a people issue than it is a religion issue.
Yeah, that's definitely a human animal problem. Like,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with us if we're willing to let things go that far out
and
of
it's
control.
kind of like with with legalization, there will be people who will abuse that and do stupid things.
Most assuredly.
Yeah, I think you just have to look at the bigger picture whenever you look at those problems.
They could legalize all they want. DOT's never gonna lift my restrictions, so it doesn't matter to me. Like, yeah. So, but yeah, I agree. It's when you let yourself get into a place where you're going to let something else take control of you for the sake of belief, it's just not good.
Yeah, and I think it's that people they make a decision that this is who they are, this is what they believe, and automatically you're shutting yourself off to everything else, all the other possibilities, and you're not able to be open to anything as soon as you say, this is it,
Yeah, and that's such an to even break that down into a more simplistic thought is like, okay, if there's a nail sticking up through the floorboard in your hallway and you walk through your house barefoot and you continue to step on that nail and you're like, oh, well, that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Until you manage to give yourself tetanus and you lose a leg over it. And, it's like, like you see, I am what I am tattooed on somebody's arm. It's like, yeah, but you could just not be an asshole.
Yeah.
You could just change your own thinking. You could just do something small, different, and see the way that goes.
You have power over your own world. You create.
Yeah, that's it. Just that kind of stuff. Like, and I was gonna say, and I think that's from from analytical brain. It's just look, it doesn't compute to be that way. If something is drawing you down a dark path, you stop walking down the dark path.
Yeah, and I understand that it's easy to say that, but then we all have a tendency to.
We're all gonna do it. It doesn't. I was gonna say it doesn't matter how hard I beat the chest. People are still gonna leave the reservation. Like it's just it's gonna do that.
Yeah,
there's nothing you can do about it. People are complex and simple, all in the same turn of the page. It just it's weird and like when you. Yeah, it's like being on the outside of a toxic relationship, and you're like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
I've been there.
It's like,
and
when you're inside, you never notice.
Yeah, you can't see yourself. You can't be objective about yourself. I think it's very hard to do that, and when you are, it can be very terrifying.
Yeah, because
you have to really look at who you are, what you've done, and bear that sort of burden. And until you do that, it's really hard to move on. But to do that is very terrifying and difficult.
Well, so. I forget. I was gonna say this. I'm gonna have to make this my final thought because I gotta pee.
Me too.
That's fine. No, I forget who it was that said it. There was it was one of the major psychologists. It was either Freud or that other guy who's not Freud, whose name I can't remember. But he said every person is light and dark, and the people that can admit the fact that they're light and dark are the ones that will survive. Yeah. And it's like, no, we're all monsters on the inside. Just deal with it.
Yeah.
It's like that. Those are the people that you see that are on stage just going at it to the maximum potential, and they're doing their thing, and you're like, well, how could they possibly do that? And I can't. It's because you can't admit that on the inside of you is that same monster. Yeah. It's like
and there's a lot of power in being able to take responsibility for both the good and bad things that you do. I think. And to be able to look at yourself and say, this is, I did this. I take full responsibility, and to just own it. Just own who you
gotta
are.
do it, and
and you'll be more real as a person, and you'll be able to have better relationships and better, because until you can be real with yourself, you can't be real with anyone else either. And, you have to go through that sort of self-realization before you even can be.
And I was gonna say, and how you can go 72 years of life and still be president without having done that to yourself is beyond me. So what an excellent place to end that. Yeah, it's just a lighthearted. No, thank you so much for your time.
Oh yeah, it was nice to meet
I
you.
really appreciate it. And that was Rebecca Magar, and you're with Wailing Wizard at what is it? Facebook.com/Wailing Wizard.
Yes. I also have a website. It's wailingwizard.com.
Ooh, wailingwizard.com.
Yeah.
Cool.
You can find me on all the social media sites if you go there.
Ooh, excellent.
Yes.
So thank you so much. It was really fun talking to you.
Yeah, it was
I
a great
appreciate
talk.
it. So yeah, let's not together.